think we're live.
I think we
It's
are.
always a game, you know.
We didn't do the fancy Get Unstuck title card today.
We didn't. We forgot.
So I'm just, you know.
It's funny because I literally just said I'm going to do the thing for a second. But anyway.
Yes.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be watching from. This is the Get Unstuck show with myself and my friend and colleague, Marcella Shine. Our job and mission here, ultimately on a weekly basis, is to try and work with one entrepreneur or some expert to try and give you tips on how to get unstuck. As entrepreneurs, every day we basically find ourselves stuck with something, right? Like we're trying to find more customers, how to make more money, how to save some money in someplace else, how to get a product shipped, whatever it is, right? Marcel and I were talking about this, and what we realized is that the thing we relish the most is helping other entrepreneurs, and that's what this show is for. So just in case you want to find any past episodes or you'd like to be on the show, quick shout out. You can find the links to all of our current episodes over at foundercraft.com. You want to get on this show, you got a problem you want to get unstuck, then we are here for you. You can go over to this URL right here, ask.fan/getunstuck/reply. That'll come right to our inbox, and then we will give it a look and try and figure out when you can get on with us. So today we have a really fun show and topic. Not really fun, I guess, actually, sorry. It's an interesting topic. And we have a guest today, an old colleague of mine, Ed O'Brien. And Ed had just recently posted an article about empathetic design and sort of how to apply design thinking, especially in these COVID ages, and sort of what it means relative to like our customer base and other things like that. And so we thought that this was actually a thing that a lot of people are stuck on right now, actually, right? It's just figuring out, can I market to my customers? Can I try and sell to them right now? Like, is it appropriate behavior, right? And so we're going to take a deep dive into that. But first, let's bring out Ed so we can have him introduce himself.
Hey, gang, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon. Good to join you here. Good to touch base on this topic that I wrote about earlier this week. Have to give credit to some folks at EPAM Continuum where I work who helped me kind of get this piece to a place that we were all happy and content with. But the topic, as Greg alluded to, is empathetic design. And I was fortunate enough to put an article out in the world that I guess is getting a little bit of attraction, and I'm excited about that. By way of my background, so I've been with EPAM Continuum, which is an innovation and design firm headquartered in Boston. I've been there for about 4 years, and my role is sort of formally and informally program and business development. So I really think the job entails sourcing of interesting, thorny problems. Clients come to us large and small across a diversity of industries with complex problems that they're trying to solve for, whether it be an employee experience project, a customer experience project. And we apply this framework or this lens that we call design thinking, which is not something that we own. It's not proprietary to what we do, but we've been doing it for a really long time. We've been doing it for over 30 years. And so our process is kind of honed and we think it's important. And that's kind of how we think about design. And that's where we get started, is this notion of user centricity. So within the framework of the article, I was thinking about a few things as you know, I think all of us are doing right now. We're having a little more time at home. We've got an opportunity to take a deep breath, to decompress a little bit, to pause, and to, you know, sort of assess and look at what's going on in the world. And I was making a few observations, and one of them was how brands were positioning themselves in this new environment. I was seeing some media, some of which I thought was a little off base, a little bit off-putting in some ways. For example, I saw an ad for sandals, and I thought, well, when's anybody going to make that kind of a trip anytime soon? And this notion of being on a beach full of people, like, that seems a little bit disconnected from reality right now. But then I was seeing some other creative with some brands that were sort of positioning themselves as saying, hey, look, our business is going to take a pause, but we're taking that opportunity to reboot and to recalibrate and maybe think about some different things and some different ways in which we could offer our business. So I didn't call it out in the article, but Uber certainly comes to mind. It's a business that's just getting crushed right now. They don't have a CTO. I think that person just stepped away like within the last 2 days, and they're contemplating layoffs. But yet they spent a substantial amount of money on some creative that said, stay home right now and get yourself well, and we'll be back. And so I was seeing some other examples of that playing out in the marketplace. And then I was thinking about my own role and kind of what we're doing at EPIM Continuum, and thinking about how we position ourselves and thinking about what we could do to support sort of the larger community that we're a part of. And Gentle Mask was a project in addition to a few others that we had going on that seemed to resonate with what's happening in real time right now and what people are after. So that was the genesis of the article. And again, I'm super psyched to talk to you guys here today about it. So thanks for the invite.
All right. Unmuted. Am I unmuted?
You're back.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ed. And this topic really resonated, I think, for me. This week, I spoke at the Inno conference, and actually, a very much on point, a question directly related to this was asked from the audience during my session. Should we be applying, or how would we engage PR or marketing people sort of like in this time? So I think it's a very salient point, and I think everyone is sort of trying to sort through it. I'd like to hand it to Marcella, though, to give her a chance to chime in and her thoughts as well.
Now, I've had a lot of mentoring conversations with either small business owners that are afraid were initially afraid to get out there and even talk about what they were doing. And so the first 2-3 weeks were definitely thoughtful times, right? So how can we apply what we know to make sure that you're still relevant for your community? And sometimes it was really hard, right? Because you don't want to ask people to spend money right now. And so we spent time thinking about messaging and making sure that first and foremost, they just plummeted through their content calendar and cleaned it up, so that nothing went out the door that seemed insensitive, that nothing went out the door that, just as you said, is not relevant to today. So that was the first pause that we took. And I think any brand that did that just took the first right step. Then I'm sure we're going to talk about the more challenging step, which is, so now what do I say? How do I take something that's not relevant to COVID, not relevant to people today, and keep myself top of mind for when it becomes relevant again? And I think that's easier said than done.
Agreed. I'll quickly react to that. So the last part, there was a last minute edit in my piece, and that was because as the piece was coming together, I was sort of thinking that just as you said, that there's we went through a period of time where everybody kind of shut things down, but I now think we're entering a new phase where things are reopening, and whether we're ready for that or not, I think is a separate topic and a separate discussion. But I think the reality is that businesses in certain parts of the country feel like, and local and state governments feel like there's some readiness toward opening up businesses. So what does that mean, and what is that next step, and how do brands, how do organizations, how do restaurants, how does mom and pops, large corporations, how do they reopen these businesses in a safe way for employees first, and how do they do it very safely for their customers? And I think this is the new phase that everybody's wrestling with. And I think if brands took time to sort of reboot over the last 3 to 4 weeks to think about what this next phase is going to look like, I think this is the early days of when you'll see some of these guys come out and maybe even slingshot ahead in some ways, because they have spent the last 3 weeks not just necessarily sitting around, but thinking about what their offering might actually now look like, and how it could be different and maybe even better.
Yeah, I think to the point I think you both have touched on, it's the challenge is that businesses certainly have this need for revenue, but the consumers have not necessarily risen to the need for consumerism, right? So, there's pressure to reopen so that restaurants can reopen, but restaurants reopening at 25% capacity. Well, restaurants weren't designed to run at 25% capacity. They're designed to run at 100% capacity, right? And so it feels like there is still that, I think you said it right, that we're in this middle period. And I think the real question is, from a strategic point of view, is how long do you think this is for, right? And so it feels to me like it's problematic to pretend that this is a short-term thing, right? Like that, right? Like and that's good for big organizations, by the way, I would say. Smaller organizations tend to be more nimble, right? But the larger organization is often hard for them to figure out how to turn the ship, right? And so this is why not being a shitty company, like, then you never have to, it's like if you what's the thing about lies? Like, like the worst thing about telling lies that you have to remember all the lies you tell, right? Well, that's kind of like it for a lot of people, unfortunately, the state of marketing, right? Like, we build up this storyline, this plot line, and then suddenly it's like, so wait, your product's supposed to be just as good when I'm a regular person staying at home? I thought it was for this fabulous life that you were creating for me that I was going to go out and have as a result of it, right? Mm-hmm. That's the lie, right? Like, and like, and so I think like ultimately, if my suggestion is people need to have that longer term lens, like I look for the delta between what was normal and what is normal now, right? Mm-hmm. And so the real question to me is, which of the behaviors that did fall out of this, recent short quarantine are going to stick around, right? And what are consumers going to be more mindful of, right? Like, are they going to be more worried? Well, we already know like 30 million more Americans don't have their jobs, right? Like, so there's that going to be top of mind, right? But those are different opportunities in different ways to some degree, right? Like, that's a new persona, a new group of people potentially that maybe are looking for ways to upgrade their skills, upgrade fill their time, right? Do good for the world while they have it, right? Like, so a lot of people are going to use that time in different ways. Like, most people are obviously going to be struggling, right? But sometimes, and most people like try to find a way not to struggle, right? Like, so the delta, the space left by all that unemployment may be an opportunity, right? The new habits that we formed, right? Or the new sensitivities we may have in the market or to the world, right? Like, also apply. Like, I don't really want to be in a situation. I like the idea of having subscriptions for some of these things that I took for granted that I always could walk to the corner store to get, right? How many retailers have suddenly, when they didn't have to because it didn't suit their interest, didn't bother with curbside pickup, didn't or bother with any of these other features, and now suddenly, how is it possible that in 30 days you can spin up this capability? That's because you were being selfish and not actually customer focused and not solving your customers' problems the whole time. You're like, the status quo works. Fuck it. They're going to show up. They're going to come in the store. Well, now they're not, right? And so are we going to shut down curbside pickup when people can go back in the stores? That would be ridiculous, because if it works, right? Like, why would you not keep it, right? Like, so that's sort of what I'll toss into the ring. But I feel like those are some of the bounding forces that we sort of, and the new opportunities that I think are present to us now.
Gugur, it's interesting you say that, because those of us that have, for example, dual professional homes where we both work, my husband traveled all the time, but we still took the time on Sundays to drive out to Sam's Club and do the shopping, even though we shopped with the app and quickly checked out. We're realizing now, that 1 hour of time savings is a significant hour that we've given back to our children, right? And so really thinking about the new habits and how to talk about those new habits with your consumer will be a wonderful way to connect with them. I'm not even going to say market to them, because I think now we have to figure out the connection points with our consumer. And so I think really thinking about the psychology that we land on at the end of this process, whether it's in 6 months, 12 months, whatever that time frame is, people's habits and psychology will change. Because for the first time, certainly in our lifetime, we are really vulnerable to things like, the Spanish influenza was just a story. It's real now. So what's the psychology change? Really looking at those history points and figuring out the psychology change that humans are going to have the busy ones and not busy ones, right? That's how I think brands can learn to reconnect in genuine ways with that end consumer. And that's everyone from the small business owner, the restaurant down the street, to the big company that may not have been using that genuine product development mindset because they were being greedy.
Yeah, great points. Great points. I think one of my favorite quotes is when people are scared, be greedy, and when people are greedy, be scared. So, you know, that adaptation, whether you're in the market or playing the market, or whether you're thinking about your business relative to what's going on, has a lot of applicability. I think at EPEN Continuum, we're thinking a lot about some trends that were already sort of in motion or in play, and what this pandemic will do to some of those trends. So education is one that I think we're all thinking about right now, and how that paradigm is shifting. That's for quite a long time been a very expensive proposition, both in person on a college campus or elsewhere. And so, you know, do we usher in a new normal of cheaper, faster, more affordable YouTube University, or does the model hold up? You know, a lot of college presidents right now are giving serious thought and consideration to all the buildings that they've put up over the last 2 decades, and they still have debt service on those buildings, and they still have professors, and they still have administrators, and they still have all these people infrastructure wise that have to get paid. But you have young people who for a while now have come into the category and have questioned the return on investment and the amount of debt load that they're going to come out of the experience with, and is the return on investment there. So I think it's really interesting to see what will happen in a category like e-learning, and how people will behave. Some other trends that you know we've been thinking about is you know, in the area of rapid transportation and city versus suburban living. Had an interesting conversation with my teenagers last night at dinner around this topic of, you know, as generations have sort of moved through from one decade to another, you know, what has transpired coming out of the 50s and moving into the present. And so, you know, we've had a hyper focus on living and working in cities over the last decade or two, but will that now change? And if that changes, you know, what does that actually mean for rapid transportation, and what does that mean in a environment where there's concern about being close in proximity to people? So there's lots of interesting ways in which this could go. But I think the things that we sort of think about a lot are, you know, who are the new winners going to be, and then who's frankly going to get left behind. And I think there are some businesses that we could all point to that you know, that may be in some real trouble, and maybe those are the folks who, Greg, as you referenced, were, you know, maybe not very customer centric to begin with. Maybe they were, you know, printing money and doing a good job of doing that, but now they've been exposed. And so organizations that sort of reboot and calibrate and think about understanding their customers, understanding the needs and desires, those unmet needs in these new worlds and with these new trends, I think are the ones that probably are going to slingshot ahead.
Ed, when you're talking to clients or potential clients, especially now post-COVID, I'm thinking about the retail experience. And I think, again, the retail experience had started to shift already anyway. Have you thought about how both virtual, right? Like even Zoom, everybody's changing their background and looking at different ways to make this virtual living more interesting. I think retail locations are going to have to make going there even more interesting, because again, now I'm used to shopping online, right? So I think there's going to be two shifts, right? One, how do I make the virtual experience better and more real? And if I really want to drive people into stores, what do I have to do to make that happen? I'd love your thoughts on that, because I think that, again, the other day my son called me and he invited me to some Fortnite event where they had some rapper on. And I feel like I'm in technology. I'm pretty
cool,
like with it, but I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Right.
You know, and he's got a nice TV too. So I really walked through that experience. And we had a great conversation with him where he's like, maybe I'm going to create this game where people can come in and shop for things. So they're already there.
Yeah.
They're already there. I think that what shifted the most is that we have forced a much older generation that we didn't expect to be online, that we didn't expect mom and dad to go on Zoom and change their background to put Star Wars in that background. Mm-hmm. So I'd love your thoughts on what companies or brands can do to really shift into this new reality.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating discussion topic. A few things that are just bouncing around in my brain. This is happening in our own company, just like day in and day out. I don't recall pre-COVID, and pre-COVID, by the way, for me is like 6 to 8 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I don't remember doing that many video conferences with clients or even with, team members. It was generally a polycom. We'd sit in a room, people would dial in, and now that has completely shifted. Now it's all video, and now it's, how am I presenting my personal brand, which is sort of funny to think about, and how am I coming across in an experience like this? But to the point of like what's happening at retail, again, trend-wise, we were already seeing that people were not going to malls any longer. That malls were sort of dying up by 1,000 cuts. But yet we could present another argument that while a lot of the commerce was moving online across brands, there's still a social aspect to going to a mall. And I still have I have 2 teenagers, so I've got a couple of examples.
I was about to ask you.
I've got a couple examples in my house, and there's a mall not far from us, and that's still a place for them to congregate and hang out. And maybe they only have $10 in their pocket, but you know what? A week or two later, they're hauling me back there to buy something that they spotted. So, or we're going online and we're looking to purchase something that they wanted. So there's still, I think, a place there in the socialization piece. Even though we're eating more at home, even though we're spending more time in our houses than we were before, we're not going to church as often. Like, even though some of the large community aspects have sort of shifted a little bit, I still think there's a human aspect. And an example, I was on a call recently, we talked about on behalf of an airline that we do some work with, is, there's all this momentum. There has been all this momentum over the last 2 decades on replacing humans and doing that with technology. But the example that I presented on this call is Walmart greeters. Like, when I go into a store now, because the rules are completely different and because wayfinding is completely different, and I'm actually nervous when I go into the store, I kind of need a human. Even if you have signs and even if you've done an effective job of directing me through the store, I still need a human to say, hey, you look like you're kind of lost. What can I help you with? Oh yeah, that's over there. And so I don't know that you totally displace the human in retail. So that's another trend that we're thinking about. But I think this is a fascinating discussion, and we're eager to predict kind of what's next and what the world is going to look like. But it's none of us have a crystal ball, myself included.
Yeah, no crystal ball.
We're like,
But I do think, when I talk about innovation work with the clients I've had, I like to describe sort of like these, what I call the 4 waves, right? And the first wave was really the age of like just digital, like the digitization, right? So it's like just using computers for things, right? The second wave was like the big data wave. And so like the way I usually describe it is that, first we went from analog to digital, and then we realized that, well, we can't do anything. We need more data, right? And so we went back and we instrumented all of our business processes, and we did all these other things. And we got to the part where we now had all this data. As we started to get all that data, we started to realize that our customers don't like us that much, right? Which led to the third wave, which is really like the customer experience, CX, right? Sort of the broader trend and work in that area, right? Digital transformation was sort of one of them, that big data sort of genre. And then I think we're at the fourth one, right? Which is what I call the cultural wave, right? And so the reason that our customers don't like us that much is that we don't look a lot like our customers, right? And so what we found out, right, or what we are finding out, is that we can't deliver a better customer experience if we aren't better to our customers, right? And the way we do that is by being more diverse, by being more mindful, by being less aggressive in in inserting ourselves, by being more authentic in the way we talk about ourselves and the way that we actually act in our organizations, right? And so this stuff is a cycle though, right? Like, so now we have this culture. Now it's like, oh, great. Well, now we need to get data about how these cultural changes are actually impacting things, which then informs the tooling and the machinery and the digital side of it, which then informs the customer experience, right? So these things are feeding each other, but we are at the first big mountain of cultural transformation, right? Like in our ages as well. And these kind of like this pandemic, I think has been a forcing function to make a lot of people stare down exactly what that means, right? The premise of my talk earlier this week was actually about, I was asked to talk about with another guy about like how best practices yield to the next best practices. And what I basically, the thrust of my talk this week was that we're moving from a system of mistrust to a system of trust, right? And so essentially the fundamentals of existing best practices are really about how to cover your ass because of all the things you don't trust. I don't trust my employees. That's why I want everyone to go to an office. I don't trust my customers to believe me. That's why I bombard them with marketing, right? Or I don't trust that they'll believe the lie, right? I don't trust, like your skills. That's why I need to collaboratively edit with you, right? And so when you look at all of the devices that we use to define corporate culture, what they really are doing are helping us to bridge our own mistrust about all the forces that are in play, right? But when you look at where we're moving towards and what customers want is a generation about trust, right? So it's like, no, you should work when it's best. I value your results, not the clock, right? Right? I hired you because I trust you are an amazing asset and resource to do this thing. And if it takes you 1 hour or 10 hours, I get the value, right? I don't need to have you sit there. I don't need you to be in the room every minute, right? I don't need to see you every day to believe that you're working, right? I can believe our customers to be good marketers of our own products, not just the contrived things that my agencies can come up with, right?
And Greg, I love that you're saying that because I think that's also why we saw such a shift into influencer marketing. Now, let's not get into the good and the bad versions of that because there's plenty of the crappy, right? But for the brands that are being genuine and doing it well, that's why it worked, because you were showing the world like-minded people using the product and giving that product frank reviews or actually showing people using it, right? And so I will give it to Instagram and social media to hand that power back over to the consumer to raise their hand and say, I really like this product. And I think, again, you get a good sense for the ones that are real versus the ones that are the overly paid opportunities out there. But that's why that shift was able to happen. And these influencers took off because now I have real people talking about a process or a product that works for them.
Yeah. So social media has a lot of problems. I agree. But the thing it did do was introduce or give a footing for authenticity, right?
And niche people to talk,
exactly.
speak their mind.
It
right?
allowed those niche voices to have like presence and and agency sort of in expressing themselves and advocating for themselves. And I think that's a powerful thing that we did get from it. I mean, the unfortunate part is that it also brought all the crazies out with it, right? Yeah. And now the problem we have, and it is the same problem that corporations ultimately have, is now determining the signal from the noise, right? Because like the people I find that are most confused in the world, to say it the best way I can, is that they can't discern the difference between one source and another, right? Like, and so they give equal weight to like one thing versus A versus B, when there's clearly objective ways to understand A and B to understand if they should be given equal weight. But what happens is these echo chambers and these bubbles that we do have, we now are in this situation where, unfortunately, and by the way, most companies have existed in their own echo chamber of their, they stew in their own, filth, right? Like, we believe all the stuff that we put out, right? And it's that disconnect between what we say we are and who we are, right? That ultimately people pick up on. It's like the bullshit detector that every consumer has built into them. And the next
I'm
generation.
so proud of you. You kept politics out of that whole statement, and you didn't curse. That was amazing. I'm going to keep that forever, right?
I'm trying. I tried very hard.
You did great.
But what I was going to say is that like the next generation, like we look at corporate activism, corporate social responsibility, work-life balance, advocacy, all the other, and the next generation themselves. Why do they prioritize these things? Because they are the ones who have to pick up the mess, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're now like, look, I want to work at a place where I know what I do produces the results, not that it produces money, right? Yeah. And if it produces money, that's awesome, right? Like, and that's the goal. But they want to make sure they're doing good also, right?
Well, and I think what's popping into my head right now, which we have to bring up, is climate, right? And the opportunity that we now, I mean, look at COVID and what the results are with this respite that we've given the world, right? So I can't wait to, Ed, if you're not talking to more of these companies, I think you're going to see a massive trend in climate-focused companies looking at better ways to get their messaging out, because I'm working with a client right now, shameless plug. We just launched climateandcapitalmedia.com. And they're really looking for the doers of this climate economy. And there are just so many gems out there that are looking either for the funding or the lessons they need for marketing, for communication. They're there. And again, now is the time that we can really focus on these either companies or people looking to shift how we run the world so that they feel good about what they're doing. And yes, there's a lot of money to be made within that economy. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I'd love to hear about any of those opportunities that are coming your way, because I think that's another massive, massive area that is going to just explode, and for all of the best reasons. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point that you're hitting on. Again, I've got two examples in my household, but I'm sure all of us and many on the call here have similar. But young people, Gen Z, Gen Y, those folks in particular are hyper focused on climate right now. My daughter has a Finsta right now, and it's all dedicated to artwork that she's doing that is focused on the environment. So these are very heady topics right now for young people who are coming into the category of the workforce. And to connect a piece that Greg was speaking to a few minutes ago around the connection between customer experience and employee experience, I think a lot of organizations and brands and corporations have sort of treated those two things as separate islands that maybe they don't connect, or maybe we go very deep on employee and hope for the best, or we go very deep on customer and treat our employees like crap. What we heard in the last 6 weeks or so in the reconnaissance that we've done and the listening tours that we've hosted is that customers are really concerned about employees. That they're concerned, like, when I do business with you, are you safe? Like, is this, is it okay for me to come to this sandwich shop and do business with you? And are you protecting yourself? And is your company setting yourself up to be protected? Because I'm worried about you, but then I'm also worried about you as a member of the community. And, and when you go home and when you go out to shop for your own needs, like, how are you being protected? And I think the trends that we're keeping a watchful eye on are the companies that are really thinking about the symbiotic lock between customer and employee and that experience together. And I do think that to your earlier point around environment, that's a hot topic. I will say it's not the first one that clients come to us to think about, but I think you're right. We're going to hear more about that, and it's inevitable because I think most rational minds right now have settled around this notion that the climate is changing and that it is being powered by humans, that change, and so therefore what can humans do to impact that or to slow it down? I think that's a really important topic.
And I love what you just said, and I want to highlight it, that, you're starting to think about marketing messaging during this time and the difficulty in it. And that's just a clear point, right? If you as a company are not telling the world quite simply how you're handling your employees, what plans you put in, that's a great way to just go out there and talk to the world about your brand without being fake about it. If you haven't done it, then you're an idiot, right? Make sure that you're taking care of your employees and doing the right thing, and talk about it, right? Again, in a genuine way, get them to talk about what you've done for them so that the message is out there, and so that you're also setting yourself up as an example to others within your vertical, your same categories, and do the right thing right now. I've had...
Oh no, I was just going to add a little anecdote to that, actually, or a stat, because so Ed and I used to actually work together years ago. Feels like a long time now.
Not that long ago.
Couple states ago, and one of the stats that we used to have in our deck actually was that if a CEO were to state a fact, it's basically 8 times more believable if an employee states it.
Yep.
Right. Like that's how big your win is when you have a passionate, engaged, and activated employee base. Right. So, and then when a customer says it, you obviously get an even way bigger win. We never had a number on that one though.
Earned media.
Yeah, or the earned media side is amazing. Yeah. Sorry, Marcel, go ahead, please.
No, I think that was, a great follow-up point.
So just to try to bring this back to maybe some entrepreneurs out there, and we've all been entrepreneurs in our lives in one way or another. What are some of the tactical or tangible ways to sort of maybe activate some of these things as a smaller business? Or sort of, and then the second part of that, I guess, would be, how do we let people know we do these things, or should we let people know we do these things, right? Like in a good way, right? Like, I feel like, for example, like Starbucks, how they offer like free college. It's a massive halo on Starbucks, right? Because a lot of people hate Starbucks, right? Like,
and free benefit too.
But they certainly forgive it, like health benefits and being able to go to college and all these things. Like end of the day, you can not like their coffee, but it's hard to hate that they help that many people as well. Right now, some people are cynical and they're like, well, they could do a lot more with it. I get it. Everyone could always do a lot more. The people who do nothing though are the ones that you should be calling out, not the people who are trying. Right.
And Starbucks, I would share, just to interject, Starbucks, I think, gets a somewhat undeserved credit for being green. Like people have this belief that they're a green company, and the reality is that they're. Well, yeah, hello. But I think your point is a good one here, Greg. That they they've done right by their employees, and the market recognizes that, and therefore is more willing or more forgiving, I should say, for having a cup that's lined with polyurethane that you probably shouldn't throw into a recycling bin. Whereas somebody like Dunkin' Donuts, not to pick on a local neighbor here, but they've gotten punished really hard for having styrofoam cups, and that was not a uncomplicated decision for that brand, because the styrofoam cup was in their logo. It's kind of who they were. So it's sort of interesting to think about and we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about brand permissions. Like, what do you have permission to do? What do you have permission to say? And what do you not have permission to do and say? And those are really important considerations. I had this crazy, as I was sort of finishing up a workout this morning, this crazy lightning bolt idea that drive-through movie theaters, that could become a thing, right?
I've been seeing a lot of people ask about that, because
I love those. Me
too. I'd be in a heartbeat.
Why did they disappear? That's an interesting.
Did you hear about the drive-through church?
No.
Yeah, so a pastor, they repurposed I forgot what state it was in, but I heard on the news. They reused a drive-in movie theater to actually do the service. So pastor got to go to the front, and he could broadcast to all the cars, and people could still congregate, but in their own.
It's a great one.
Yeah. So if I'm an entrepreneur, I am putting my head to the ground, listening a lot, and I'm really spending some time thinking, and I'm going to a beach that's 6 feet socially distanced, and hopefully not in a big crowd, but I'm sort of spending a little time right now thinking about where are the opportunities going to be, and where could I make my move that would meet a gap, and it's not going to be just big companies that are going to solve for that. And if they do, they may do it in a really clumsy fashion.
Yeah. And Greg, going back to your point, I think there's this opportunity, again, going back to the topic of being genuine. to let customers really look at who you are, whether you're an entrepreneur in a small company or a large company. Like the other day, Tim Armstrong was on TV with his house. He was having internet issues. You know, see what people really live like or think like. Even this show, right? We were like, oh, we should go online and just have these conversations on video because we're having them anyway. So letting people take a peek at how you do things, maybe take them into your production process, maybe give them a better sense for how that widget is produced. Now's a great time to do that. And then going back again to employees, have you created an atmosphere that's shareable? If not, why is there a fear in letting your employees or your constituents share your messaging? And then it's time to fix that, right? Let's clean that up. Let's recognize that we couldn't go public, that we couldn't let Marcella sit in her living room as my employee to talk about working here because it sucks to work here, right? I don't want to talk about it. No, I'm not going to do that for you. Let's fix that now, because that, if that's not a sign that you weren't doing things the right way, here it is, right? So that's where I think entrepreneurs and whether you're a small company or large companies can really look inside, as you're saying, and examine why certain recommended tactics don't work for you.
Yeah, I'll add, I think to that end, and Ed, you made a really good point about permission. I actually have this list of like 7 things that's required for innovation to be successful anywhere. And when people always ask me like, what's the most important one? I always say it's permission, right? Because people need permission, and a good easy test is if you go to your company or your employees and you ask for help and no one volunteers, right? And what that likely is a great indicator of is some kind of misalignment, right? And so the way permission plays into that, for example, is like, you maybe like the last time you did it, someone volunteered an answer and then you shit on it, right? And so, or you don't feel like you're from a different department and you don't want your boss to get mad, right? Like it's a permission problem across the organization that they don't feel that they can do that. Because I guarantee you, everyone there has ideas, right? And everyone there can contribute something to the conversation, but it shouldn't be like pulling teeth to make it happen, right? And if it is, it means that you probably have some more work to do relative to getting your own employees to the point where they feel like they have permission to talk, permission to communicate, permission to think outside the box, permission to fail, right? And permission to experiment, right? And if they don't have all of these sort of innate skills handed to them, they're not going to be happy, right? Because like humans inherently loved exploration, right? Like we're constantly curious in one way or another. We're testing things, right? And so by taking away those abilities at work, what happens? Why do you think so many people even go do startups? They're like, oh, I was trying this idea out on the side and that idea could have been happening at your company, right? But it's not. Right? Because you are sacking all of that, ambition and all of those ideas that are potentially out there.
Greg, you're going to have to share the rest of that list with us at some point.
I can. I have it. I have a presentation with it.
Perfect.
Yeah. How do you? I think maybe a version of that is how do you instill an entrepreneurial culture within a large organization so that the best ideas stay in-house? Because if you are a big brand, then you want the best people. And you want to retain the best people, and then you also want the best ideas, and you want to have IP control over that. And I think companies, particularly large ones, have always struggled with that. I don't know that the pandemic changes that. I think that probably will inevitably be a problem anywhere because we are somewhat tribal, we are somewhat competitive by nature, and we are somewhat. In large organizations, we can be very siloed and very competitive with one another. And that's a behavior that, could shift. I think if I'm going to have a crystal ball, I might predict that it wouldn't. But again, under the category of at the C level right now, while there's a little bit of time to take a deep breath, I hope some of those considerations are being made is how do we treat the people that are working for us and are behind and supporting the brand well now? And how do we position ourselves for for growth down the road that allows for some of these great people and some of these great ideas to spring to life within our own organization. But if that isn't the case, then then there's an opportunity for, as there always have been, for an entrepreneur to spring out with their idea and take it further than they could within the corporate walls of an organization that would step on it.
I don't know why this popped into my head, Ed, while you were saying it, but we've been talking a lot about companies, but even for solopreneurs, right? I mean, Greg and I right now are two of us kind of figuring things out, building out, whether it's, incubating an idea or helping other companies innovate. There is an opportunity coming up to look at the workforce that will be made available and really network through who those people are. And again, whether it's a company or you're an individual trying to build a consulting practice or another company, who are the people that are getting left behind because of the current crisis that you should be talking to and networking with to get their mind share, to start building ideas with? There's going to be amazing talent left behind here. And that's another massive opportunity for big companies to figure out innovation programs or training programs around that. And
colleges, universities.
Yeah, and then solopreneurs to think about all the different platforms that are out there that I'm certainly starting to recommend to people that are getting laid off, whether it's, Upwork or Golance, right? All of those platforms are now going to become a great source for, the mind share of these individuals. And that's another great opportunity that's going to come out of this. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you cull through it? How do you locate them? I challenge all of us to think about that as well, because there's going to be a lot of people needing work that are going to have fascinating ideas for us to work with. Yeah,
and that's where if I'm a college or a university and my barrier of entry is $50,000 or $100,000, I'm in a tough spot right now. But you have a lot of people, like tens of millions of people that are probably they may have been in a job that they didn't like anyway. And so let's just assume they were in a service industry because it was paying the bills and it covered the rent and, it was fine. But now they're probably thinking, okay, maybe I do need to go back and get that degree. Maybe I do need some reskilling. And where am I going to get that? And is there a government support entity that helps me get there? We talked, again, back to my dinner conversation last night, the GI Bill or the WPA. Like, are there going to be programs that will be stood up, government programs that will be stood up that will help people to recover? I think that's an interesting trend to keep an eye on, what role educational institutions and governments will play in helping people to get back up on their feet and in a new economy, in a gig economy or whatever we're going to call it going forward. What is that going to start to look like? I'm fascinated personally by that topic, and but it's hard for me to predict what that'll look like. But I think there's some genuine opportunity there, and I think there's enough people that are thinking about how can we get this right so that we don't have the education gap and the poverty gap, and we can't have people falling behind at this time. We need them to move forward in life.
Yeah, I was just going to add on it. I think I want to double click on one of the points you made, that these problems are not new. So the pandemic did not cause any of these issues, right? Most large organizations are somewhat fated to die because they likely do not have the ability or talent in-house to innovate in the manner that they need to really survive, right? They certainly have the breadth and sort of the backing to sort of probably go on longer than like a startup would. But the decline is clear, right? Like, we look at the Fortune 500 and how long any company stays on it is significantly shorter than it was, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And that's because the world is changing faster, and the only kind of companies that can keep up are the ones who are nimble at heart, right? By the way, I always say this, it's not their fault, right? Because what happens is that things that work get hardened into practices, right? And so when you're small, the machine doesn't know what it's making yet. But as it does mature to understand that, it gets hyper efficient at doing that thing, right? And so they are really good, but machines lose their utility over time. And so that's how every business is. The real question is like, are we building autonomous machines now that start to figure out like, okay, like this is what's actually changing, and are they actively listening, and are they not beholden to the things that they've created, right, as the means of success, right? And so you see these younger organizations, and they have the same challenges, by the way. So I don't want anyone to think like it's any easier, right, like for a Tesla to survive than it is for like it was for a Honda to survive, right? Like they will run into the same kinds of problems eventually, right? Like, sure, you can update your car. Well, guess what? What happens when like the hardware is the thing that needs to change and you don't have a system for that, right? Or whatever it may be, you will develop blind spots. But now is the time really to be taking stock of how to be nimble, right? And the greatest credit you have that you can be nimble is that you are still working, because you did not imagine a world that was possible without you going to the office every day, right? 6 weeks ago, it was impossible, right? And yet you are still thriving. Like you are still doing all the things that you were getting done. And the important thing, one of my friends, Nikki, she made this point. She helps, she has a placement firm to help place state like moms into flexible work, right? So what she's really doing is like, you know, like she's like, I can't have a 9 to 5. I can't do 9 to 5. I'm a mom. Like I have a, you know, childcare, whatever it may be, you know, or, you know, largely moms, but I think it could be dads too. But the point being, what she says, she's like, her greatest fear when she looks at like the economy, and it's a great point she made, and I love it, is that ultimately, is that people will blame the remote part for why they're not doing well, and not actually look at themselves to understand what they've done wrong, right? Like, so, you know, when Bloomberg got interviewed about this, he was like, yeah, he's like, I don't really care. He's like, we set everyone up to work on a laptop and be able to work from wherever they are from the first day, right? And so like, there's no downtime for him, right? Like his whole organization is ready to roll, go out, you could get your work done, right? And then there's other organizations who are like Yahoo and the IBMs are calling all their employees back, and they're like, no more remote work, no more flexible time. I don't want to hear about it, right? And we need you all in the office, right? And guess what? You're either going to get it done with them there or without, right? Like, and so, you know, this is what I'm saying is that don't blame the pandemic. Blame yourself for whatever inefficiencies you have, right? There are parts that you can tangibly say are shut down. Yes, there is no foot traffic, hence you can't do business, but that you failed to innovate on ways to still do it. Did you figure out how to open up your doors and do drop-offs, right? Or did you figure out how to get online ordering working so you can actually take care of it? These are the things you could be fixing, right? And these are the things you could be implementing. And you could be getting on, you know, delivery services. And you could be doing all these other ways to like, it won't fix it all, but don't say there's nothing you can do, right? Yeah. You know, most of us had something we could do. And I feel terrible for all the people who had nothing they could do. Like, you know, like the gyms and the hair places and all the places that literally were like, no, you're not allowed to have your customers and it's like illegal for you to do it. Great. Yeah. Those are real. You can't fix those problems. Right?
But Greg, I'll give you an example of a salon owner that I know. It didn't help her keep things moving in the same way, but she went into her store and called all her clients, and she made to-go coloring kits, right? So that they could drive by. She came out and handed them their box of color. Now, again, that's not going to be the same opportunity for her to keep her business open over the long term. She's still at risk, but at least she thought through some way to move that delivery experience out of her salon and into their hands. So there is still an opportunity to innovate in some way, not for everyone. You're absolutely right. But even the ones that I never expected, because I called to check in on her, and I have to go pick up my box soon. But, you know, I was really proud of them for that, because they are, that salon's been around for 35 years. So it's pretty amazing to see how quick people can think if they want to not just be a victim. Again, restaurant workers are some people that there's very little we can do for, but I really challenge people to rethink their business when they can, and then learn from that, because that may be a service that can keep going in the future. It would be interesting to see how much even traditional businesses change because of this.
It's sort of funny to think too, like two somewhat separate thoughts here, but I'm butchering this, but economics can be the mother of invention, right? So when people move into a somewhat desperate mode, either as an organization or as an individual, if things are dire, you get creative really fast, and you think about things in a different way than you would when you were comfortable. And Greg, you made a point earlier around it's not an organization's fault if they've not gotten complacent, but year over year, month over month, 5%, 7% annual growth. We're hitting our numbers. The stockholders are happy, but we're not really innovating. We're not really creating this new thing. And God help us if something comes over the hill, because they're gonna take our business, because we're not paying close attention to that, because we're just so focused on hitting our numbers. So it's not their fault, but the machine, which I think is what you were saying, the flywheel is one that they have to stay on, and they don't have opportunity to step off and take a long view on where they're going and directionally where they want to plant the flag or that new offering.
Absolutely, it's a design problem, unfortunately. But Ed, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're just up on time. Ed, is there a way for folks to reach you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, I can. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, but maybe it's easier for me to just send you my contact info and you could push it out there.
Awesome.
How does that sound?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
We will absolutely do that. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll be back next week with another interesting guest that I think I have lined up. But once again, if you would like to appear on the show, either for help or to mentor with us or to just share your thoughts, hit us up over here at ask.fan/getunstuck/apply. You can find these episodes and all the future ones over at foundercraft.com. It's been a pleasure having you all again, my friends, and I look forward to chatting soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Everyone. Have a great one.